Vandeham Shri Rama Krishna Abhaya Charano Sakho Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subala Priyo He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Shri Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara Ki Jai Bhakti Vinod Parivar Ki Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanand. So this morning I'm going to entertain questions. Yes.
How we can get the adhikar, necessarily so we can take full advantage of your teachings and your company.
That's like asking how do we become Krishna conscious? I don't have a silver bullet for you. We already. This is what we do. Sadhu sangha, hearing, chanting. Take seriously what you have been given. You've been given a mantra, so you take it seriously and sit, chant your mantra as if you're taking a trip. Where are you going to go? Pay attention. Everything come from there. So, what else? Another question.
I was wondering, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the modes a lot in the later section. But in terms of bhakti being, because it's nirguna, and we see many examples, for example, in the Bhagavatam, like Vritrasura and others, to show the difference between bhakti being beyond the modes and these things. I was wondering what the importance is of understanding of the modes, like to what degree should one have an understanding of the modes and implement trying to have sattva guna, for example, in one's life, as opposed to bhakti practices directly.
Well, with regard to the modes of nature, sattva guna is the influence of material nature that from which happiness comes, knowledge comes, clarity, the ability ultimately to discriminate between spirit and matter and what matters. Rajaguna is an influence that leads us to believe that we would be well served by trying to improve our lot in material existence. Obviously, we have to do that to some extent, right? But as a goal, that's not very worthwhile pursuit. And then Tamaguna's influence is not even about that, about striving to become better or improving your material situation. It's kind of going backwards, even materially speaking. So comparatively, then the mode of goodness is influence that's conducive to spiritual pursuit. You might liken it to the airport. So the airport is not a place to live. You go there to go somewhere else. So it's a lift off point, right? So, materially speaking, we want to create a sattvic type of a circumstance. Let's say, with regard to world, well, to get away from the world, and for example, in nature, in the forest, is sattvic as opposed to the industrial complex being Rajasic and Tamasic, and that setting is conducive to spiritual practice. So it's important. I mean, you obviously don't want to live in a tamasic environment. In the Rajasic environment, by contrast, it may look to be desirable comparatively, but it falls short, right, in terms of providing us a destination, if you will, that's enduring. So I would say it's fairly important. And there's a chapter about it in the Gita. You can, as you say, Bhagavatam is dealt with, and it's also part of what's out there, if you will. As I say, the questions of what's out there and who's asking the question. So it's a plus, I would say, of Hinduism and the Hindu texts like the Gita, the Bhagavad, so the sacred texts that they deal with that. They may not deal with it in a way that that modern scientific community finds credible. That's another issue. But compared to the holy books of the Bible, the Quran, there's nothing about what's out there, what the world's, what the objective world, if you will, is like, and it's half the equation, right? There's the subjective realm and the objective realm. So it's a fairly more comprehensive approach to the nature of being and reality. And while the descriptions of material nature or the objective world, as I say, may look primitive or foreign or difficult to understand or less detailed than what you derive from modern scientific communities in deep investigation into the details of what's out there and how it works and so forth. I mean, look where it's ended up. It's ended up largely in terms of the dominant philosophical and scientific perspective that there's no one inside asking the question, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So they pride themselves in showing that we know how this works. We can show you, put this together and put hydrogen together with oxygen and that's it, H2O, you get water, so wow. Whereas with the broader brush, the nature of the objective world is painted in our texts, I think in a deeply meaningful way, with an emphasis on the fact that it's temporal nature and its illusory nature. Here today, going tomorrow, it's temporal again. Its immeasurability, if you will, which is what modern science is about, measuring it all. It makes a strong case for its being immeasurable. To measure, that is what Maya means. So to measure, to try to bring it into the fist of your intellect and know it all. And you don't even know how big it is to start with, right? What to speak of know it all? If you know how everything works on this planet, how do you know it works the same somewhere else? And whether there are other universes and so on and so forth. So it's be a lot of time spent searching in the Bhagavatam, Gita texts like this to save us a lot of time with in a broad sense, with their description of the objective world and how it's objectively undesirable place. to try to reside permanently and happily. And so much then energy has been put into the subjective world and the nature of the inquirer and so forth. This is the difference between modern texts and the sacred books, let's say, of the Hindus. One of the primary differences. And while the inner pursuit of the nature of the subjective world is the focus in those texts, the concentration. Yeah, there's some, perhaps you could say, some loss with regard to the other side. The gain is worth it. In other words, a loss in terms of a detailed description of matter and so forth. And you don't hear about strong and weak nuclear force and gravitational pull and so forth in the Bhagavad Purana, or quantum fields and so on and so forth, right? But in those pursuits, again, you lose sight of the inner world largely. At least that's what's happening in the world philosophically, where philosophy is now informed by scientific data and so forth. And the dominant conclusion is there is nobody inside. There's nothing there. We say there's everything there. That's everything. Everything is consciousness is the basis of everything. Nothing lives outside. Nothing exists outside of consciousness. We certainly don't know of anything. What would it be? I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. And everything, as I said the other day, can be denied and say, well, it won't endure. But you can't say that about consciousness because it requires consciousness to say it. So these are actually quite profound, arguments. And the emphasis of the sacred books of the East. In fact, if modern science was to look anywhere more outside of itself for insight into the nature of the subjective world, historically, objectively speaking, we could say it's been India, into Buddhism or Hinduism and so forth. Not that it's been considerable, but as time goes on, it increases more and more. And when people in that community become frustrated with the reductive perspective, that it's not working, that everything's not physical, it's not working out, doesn't make sense, then we find that the ideas they come up with resonate with Eastern philosophy. They make connections with persons of such persuasion and so forth. It's happening more and more. So, but anyway, again, regarding your question, modes of nature is a certain way of talking about the world. I mean, I suppose that you could think about it and try to rebrand it, instead of the modes of nature with some other name. But I mean, it's significant. You drive down the road, you see a billboard, come here and play poker, at the casino, Tamaguna, keep driving, See another one, Rajaguna, Sattvaguna, go to church on Sunday, or something. Saying from the local church. So it's good to see, again, to see the world in terms of these influences and see the influences in your own life. It's like a lot in your psyche, which will carry forth into your physique, your physical features as well, right? To see how you're being influenced by these different modes and being pulled in. You can solve a lot of your problems. You can save money on counseling. You can understand, I'm being strongly influenced by Tamaguna and Rajaguna, and trace out, how that influence is getting the best of you. And so it's very, very, very powerful in this regard. And then the Gita goes on, to tell us that these are foods in this mode, these are, such in this mode. And so it's a good list to know them. And of course, with regard to food, there are sattvic food, rajasic food, tamasic food, but then there's food that we offer as well. That is another thing. Not that we, but I mean, to be aware of those things, it seems such a useful guide to help steer our lives in sattvic and ultimately a transcendent perspective, and to get to the airport, so to speak, so that you're ready to lift off. If in our practice of bhakti, we should find ourselves moving from those influence of the lower modes. This is what the Bhagavatam tells us. Rajas tamo bhava kamalo bhadayaschaje cheta eteranabhidam stitam sattve prasidati. So, yeah, this is after the Bhagavatam says what nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloka bhakti bhavati naistiki. By regular service to the person Bhagavat and hearing of the book Bhagavat, then the influence of the material nature is largely removed, and naistiki, when in one's practice becomes steady, then it says tada, and it goes and explains it in a little detail. Tada rajas tamo bhava kama lobha dayaschaye. So rajas, tamas, kama, lobha, kama, longing, lobha, greed. So rajas, tamas, tada rajas tamo bhava kama lobha dayaschaye. You're giving us a meter, a gauge, to see I'm becoming free from rajas and tamas. We're talking here to some extent about bhakti rasa and sakya rasa. So you have to look and see where is the rajas and tamas, where is the kama and lobha in my life. And so it's a lower gauge, but it's you have to pass through, right? Such things. So kamalobhadas cheta ejanavidam stitam sattve prasidati. When it comes to the sattva and sudasattva, which is transcendent. So the Bhagavatam is telling us this is gradual process. It doesn't say, and so regularly hear the Bhagavatam, and then next week you'll be stepping into Krishna Lila. So there's some distance to go, some heart cleansing to go on. So it's a good gauge, to understand the modes, to reflect on, expand upon what's said in the Gita. When you just look at the world and you look and you see the tamas, the rajas, the sattva. There's Sudasattva too. Here we come for such a gathering, right? So those are some thoughts about that. Does that help? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Is it possible to, sort of engage those qualities in Rajyoga to for your bhakti? So if you desire to have more of a favorable situation in your life, whether it be work, whatever, in order to then practice, is that considered sort of mode of passion, or is it dovetailed in kind of?
Well, we have to understand we are all constituted, materially speaking, biologically and psychologically, of these modes of nature. So we have to engage our whole being in bhakti, right? Krishna consciousness. So aside from the modes, we are advised to create a favorable situation for ourselves to practice in. That's common sense. So materially speaking, the energy to do from so is derived from rajas, but it's or you let's say you want to relative to your question, you want to you're a doer, in the world, so do something for Krishna, right? So make a temple, make a whatever. So that's engaging those influences on our lives in Krishna consciousness. So the answer is yes. You follow? Yeah.
Otherwise, do you become quite passive otherwise? Do you maybe go through?
Depends who you are, what your makeup is, and so forth. But for you, I think, yeah, right. Passive may not be necessarily bad either. So depends how we're driven. So how to transcendentalize, spiritualize it all, something like that, right? And there's also a nice section of the Bhagavatam speaking about bhakti in this mode, bhakti in that mode, and so forth. Where, for bhakti, for material ends in sattva, rajas, and tamas, and that's a good section to study. You don't want to do that. What else? Yes.
Prayers. When we pray, should we ask Krishna, like we are not having this or not achieving something, and Krishna is granting us something, or we should assume that he already gave us this? Because there is since I'm on internet getting some suggestions, I'm looking some affirmative things, and then the tendency in modern world when praying, they are praying to God or to the universe, whatever their conception, is that it is like the prayer should not be posed in such a way like I'm lacking something and maybe God will give me this, but because He is Almighty, He most probably will give me, so let me immediately think that He gave me this what I'm longing for, and in such a way formulated the prayer. Because if we are all the time from the place of lacking, asking, it seems like we will never achieve the desired goal of the prayer.
Not sure about that question.
Okay, just like this. For example, I'm asking Krishna for something to, for example, be free from lust. And should I formulate this prayer like He already helped me, and like saying, thank you that I'm free from lust, for example. This is like a prayer in a sense of already assuming that I am freed. Or we should ask in the sense, please help me that to overcome lust or to overcome lustful desires or whatever else.
I don't know. I think that what you're asking, and you mentioned internet, things on the internet, I think there's a lot, and I may be not entirely understanding your question, but there's a fair amount of discourse, if you will, on the internet about what I would call neo-Advaitin perspective that take some basic ideas from Advaita Vedanta, like the idea that you're already enlightened. You're already, the soul, the self is already enlightened. And so from that perspective, I suppose someone could think, I'm already free from lust. Why don't I realize it? So a lot of that discourse, I think, ends up in actually absolutely nowhere. You're already enlightened, and you just don't know it. And we're going to talk about it a little bit, and we're going to talk our way into into knowing it by saying that it gets pretty well. From what I've seen, it gets pretty circular and kind of abstract and not doesn't turn into anything any practical spiritual practice. You can't kind of you just kind of can't think your way into this. It is true that the self is pure. The Atma is pure. The Atma doesn't have any lust. That's true. But it's like the light is always on, but if you put a shade over it or a box over it, well, you still have to remove the box, right? And there's some practice to do that. So again, I don't know if I'm really getting at what you're asking, but I mean, I think that we want to know how to pray. There were many examples that have been there, and it's so many songs and so many verses and so forth, and they don't sound like the kind of thing that you're talking about that you picked up off the internet. So we would probably do well to spend our time looking at those prayers. They're many of them are voiced by persons who are already very successful in accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, in the market, the spiritual, in the spiritual marketplace. But do they have a track record? I mean, they're a great religious. I mean, Christianity is a great tradition, a religious tradition that has a pretty good track record too, especially in the Catholic schools. As time goes on, they're not producing as many saints, I guess, but neither is the practice being taken as seriously as it was in previous times. There's less motivation, even. You can imagine but how motivated the early Christians were in a Roman world, and their savior having been crucified and so forth. A lot of motivation, a lot of heavy spiritual practice and good results, right? There's a tradition, and the Hindu traditions as well, whether they be a monistic tradition or a theistic tradition like our own. So if you want to get an education, okay, let's say you want to get an education and you're given a choice. Do you want to go to Harvard University or Oxford University, or would you rather go to the online, Phoenix University online? I mean, it's not, it's called, in the United States, we call Harvard and so forth the Ivy League. The idea is that it's been around for a long time. It's got ivy growing up the walls all the way up, It's been there for a long time. It's well established. It's produced a lot of results, tangible and so forth. And you get your education there. Your likelihood of getting employed and fruitfully and so forth is excuse me, is very good. So with these sampradayas, these great traditions within Hinduism, they have a track record. And it's common for people in modern society, especially with the internet. You've got all kinds of entrepreneurs on there and YouTubers and just like making a living out of, because they can talk. Just because somebody has a gift for talking doesn't mean they know anything. Right? And practically speaking, if you watch something on YouTube, you got to like skip ahead. Well, we get to the point. Get to the point. Get to the point. He's just talking. I'm talking. what's the answer? You know, three quarters of the way through the thing that's in the, you know, this is what it's about, you know, and then you got to go, you know, three quarters of the way to get to the subject. So it's they have a gift for talking, and that's what they're like. And so you know, there's a form of employment for them, right? Um, and be sure to subscribe and click the like button. You know, so you know, it's not a bad thing, but I mean, to there's a great wealth in these traditions that I wouldn't it would be hard to replace, you know. And then and the presenters, if you will, in the tradition, that they're seasoned persons, and so you know, your question is how to pray. I mean, and we have so many examples and the good results. So I would look towards the tradition for the answer to that. And there are plenty of persons in the tradition praying to become free from lust and greed and so forth, right? So you could say you don't really have any lust and greed. You're actually enlightened, and yeah, thank you for enlightening me. And can imagine yourself, you know, I suppose, to be free from things that you're not. I think that you know, there's with this neo-awakening trend, there's a lot of imagining that that you're enlightened. I mean, I find it to be appalling to be personally. So those are some thoughts on that. What else? Yes.
If you had to start your Sangha again,
If you have what?
start your Sangha, Chaitanya Sangha, establish again, if you had a chance from the scratch, what would you do differently on the path and your experience?
I don't think you want to hear that. Well, I will say this, that I don't think that we're living in a time where forming ashrams is that constructive. When I felt that it would be in the best interest of serving Prabhupada to serve separately from ISKCON, then I thought, well, I guess I have to start some ashrams, and I wanted to continue to circulate Prabhupada's books, but they wouldn't sell me Prabhupada's books to sell. That's how bad I was, you know, thought to be. So that I thought, well, I guess I better have to write books. So I started by writing, and then I thought, well, we would need to have I wanted to have a reading congregation, people who were actually coming or becoming inspired based on the philosophy, rather than you could get people to come for other reasons too, because you got a nice property, or you've got you press their emotional buttons, and so forth, and so I was not interested in the latter. So I started to write, and but I also started to form ashrams. I thought that was a good thing to do, and I had a different idea about how the ashrams should be and so forth as well. But I found over time that it was a very different time than, for example, this 1960, 1970. It's very, very different. And there's not as much appetite for that, and even amongst those who had an appetite for that in the 60s and 70s and joined all these ISKCON ashrams and so forth that were popping up everywhere. All you need to do is have a Sunday love feast and tell people about reincarnation, and you're not God, and Krishna's, beautiful and attractive, and people would join. I mean, I was living on the street, so to move into an ashram was an upgrade, right? Um, um, so things are different, and I found that the ashrams had like revolving doors that were a little disconcerting. Because people didn't have the adhikar to stay in an ashram. And when you don't have the adhikar to live in an ashram, then also you can find fault. That doesn't happen too much, but it can happen. And then you come, you ask me to teach you about Gaudiya Vaishnavas, I do it, I teach you, and then you complain about it. Well, as you ask me to do it, this is what it is, this is how it works, this is what we do, and later you complain about it. So, and there's a lot of there's an idea that you have a guru, and the guru tells you everything what to do in your life, right? You should do this, you should turn left, you should turn right, you should sleep this way, not that way, go here, go there. And I just don't find that that's very, that model is very, very, very useful, very constructive. And I think it's more useful for people to lead their lives, worry about all the things that go on there, and teach them what Krishna consciousness is by example, and by writing, having gatherings like this and so forth. And so the effort that I put into forming ashrams, I think I wouldn't have, in retrospect, I wouldn't have done that. I don't think there's any loss. I think we have a very good sangha. It's very, very strong and vital, and enthusiastic and so forth. And I don't have to have you all living with me, and you don't have to live with me either. So, because there's a whole economy that you have to figure out for that, right? How are you going to maintain the place? And then you maintain the place based on, several people that join, but then they really don't have adhikar to be living there in the first place. A lot of young men and some women too have a romantic idea, about, yes, I'm going to join the ashram, and I'm going to, it's kind of romantic. It's not like they don't have the adhikar for it, really. That, yeah, and then it shows up, and then you've created something that based on an economy, and then the next thing you don't have that economy, and then you have to do something. The congregation needs to support it, and it's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was told by Gaura-Kishore, don't preach, it's just a botheration, it's a problem. Bhaktivinoda preached, and at the end of his life he said, I tried, it didn't work. Oh well, he retired for the last 4 years of his life. Of course, we think he did a lot, right? But from his own perspective, he thought like that. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur formed Gaudiya Math, had 64 monasteries. Prabhupada said in the end, at an early age, about 62, 64, something like that, 68, he was disappointed. He told Prabhupada, we made this big effort to make the marble temple, as it was called. Because they called it a marble temple, you can understand that the temples, if you will, in the dhams where all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas weren't made out of marble. They were just little preaching centers, something like that, simple. He went to Calcutta and made a temple out of marble. So it was a big thing, the Bagh Bazaar of Gaudiya Math. And he had his good reasoning for it. And he was using, this Yukta Vairagya perspective in a dynamic way, use things in Krishna service, and but at the end, he told Prabhupada, and they're fighting over who gets to stay in which room. This is Bhaktisiddhanta talking about the members living in the mat, brahmacharis and sannyasis, fighting over which room. I should get that room, not the. And he was disappointed. The perspective that he shared with Prabhupada was one that, I mean, I spent all this effort to do this, and this is what happens. That, I'm out of here. Is this kind of the way that he what he revealed to Prabhupada. So at the same time, there's a lot of good that came from that, and so on and so forth. But there may be other ways, to do it as well. There's two forms, I would say, of institutionalization of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and I liken the institutionalization of the teaching to the making of a lake out of the waterfall of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstasy being, which is difficult to approach, not understand, and so forth. And the Goswamis, the founding members and the charges of the Sampradaya, they institutionalized that ecstasy in the form of their books. They located that ecstasy on the scriptural map, explained it, and showed how you could also approach it, and so on and so forth, and enter into it. Now, that's kind of a softer form of institutionalization, and it's more difficult to corrupt. Book's been printed, it's there. How are you going to corrupt it? A harder form, if you will, a more concrete form of institutionalization is to have buildings and properties and so forth in the name of Gaudiya Vaishnavism and corporation. That requires more income and people, and engages more people potentially, and so forth and so on. But it's more prone to corruption. When Prabhupada founded ISKCON, the day that he signed the papers for the corporation, he said, so today we're forming ISKCON Corporation, but if it gets in the way of Krishna consciousness, then we'll leave it. He said at the time of forming the institution, so he must have been reflecting on what little Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had shared with him about his own thinking about the institution. So I have a little bit of a similar experience with institutionalizing on a more concrete level, the advantages of it and the disadvantages of it. And also, I'm not an organizational person. I'm not a managing type of person. I'm not that much of a people person either. I like to spend a lot of time, alone by myself. I mean, I can do it, but it's not my nature. I'm an intellectual type of a person, and an inspirational person in a way, by example and so forth. But to organize people and everything, it's not something that I do. And if you want to form an institution with ashrams, then you got to deal with all that kind of stuff. In ISKCON, when I was in ISKCON, I didn't do any of that. I got up in the morning, chanted my japa, went to Mangal Artik. I started it. Chant all your japa before Mangal Artik. I started that in ISKCON, and it went everywhere amongst all the brahmacharis and brahmacharinis who were serious and going out and selling books. All around chanted before Mangal Artik. Then you go to Mangal Artik, Tulsi Puja, and then the japa period is replaced with reading. You read for 2 hours, then you go to the class, take prashadam, go out, sell books, come back, take a shower, go to the Artik, go to the class, read the Krishna book until you fall asleep. So it's basically the lifestyle, right? That's all I did, and I wasn't, really very social. And so, coming out of ISKCON and then having to do things that I hadn't done before, like manage people and organize. Okay, it's not that difficult, but it's just not my temperament and so forth. So So I guess I would have done that differently. And you know, I acquired some very nice properties, which I thought would better showcase Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and I thought to populate them and with devotees. Had you know, a little bit of a different idea. I thought my ideas were very good, but I think I misjudged the adhikar of my students in terms of their ability to um, uh, to uh, to do that, you know, their part in that. I think it would have been great if those things, those projects were done. I thought, you know, well, it's okay, maybe we have 50 monks, we can separate, you know, 10 here, 10 here, 10 here. Prabhupada wanted 25 sannyasis to stay in Vrindavan full time and take care of Krishna and Balaram. Imagine that would have been if it, but you know, it didn't happen. So you know, I spent a fair amount of time for that. It didn't compromise my writing because they're pretty good, you know, quite a number of books have come out, and they're all very unique. I mean, they're all very core Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but they're very much have intellectual integrity also, and they're uh, compelling. And I think they're largely written for the devotee community themselves. Rather than to bring somebody in the front door, I'm trying to keep people from going out the back door, and because they didn't quite understand how good of a thing that they were really involved in, right? So I think I would have spent less time trying to establish ashrams and travel and preach and meet people and share books and have programs like this and maybe a little more Bhakti Vinod-esque, perhaps, or in previous times. I think that model is there, right? And so those are some of my thoughts. Yes.
Just kind of follow up to that. Don't you think that like nowadays it's more Grihastha communities are built like in North Carolina, for example?
Yeah.
Isn't it more sustainable?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Let the devotees form their own communities of sorts rather than me giving the idea and I'm like too far ahead of everybody. We should do this. I'm not wrong about it, but but I'm too far ahead of the curve, so to speak. So, you know, let organically, yeah, devotees in areas to get together in their homes, chant, invite other people. I'll come there and visit and speak and so forth. Take prashadam, speak, and go to the next place. Something like that. I think that's a good model. And if something comes out of that, then you know the community, relative to their own level of interest and enthusiasm, they acquire a property or something, or you know, all good, you know. It doesn't have to happen either. Everybody's got a property. Everybody's got a home, an apartment, or something, and all you need is a place where you get together with others and hear and chant, right? So keep it simple. I mean, yeah, that, we do hear that here, right? I could say, you know what, let's build a temple here in Poland, you know, let's get a piece of property and make a temple, and then who's going to live there? Everybody likes that idea, but who's going to live in the temple? That's another thing. Love that one to go to, you know. Who's going to live there? Who's going to support it? You know, and it's very easy for devotees to economically support a project, but then things come up in their life, and that's the easiest thing for them to. Well, I can't afford this month, you know. But they're not that anchored into I'm a sadhaka. This is important. It's expendable. He doesn't. Yeah, you should think of it like I have to eat, and so I have to spend for Vaishnavism. That's spending on my spiritual life, but it's not often not understood like that. So yeah, I think I'm very happy with what we've our the Sri Chaitanya Sangha. It's made up of all kinds of people. I don't even know some of them. Hmm. I get letters from people. My guru is so and so. I live over here, and I've been listening to your lectures and reading your books for years, and I wanted to let you know I'm out here. I get letters like that all the time, where they ask a question, and I answer objectively, and they're all members of my sangha. I've got underground members, Parakia members. And I think that's good. I like it. I like it. So, I would have, I think, focused more in that way, and I did that earlier on too, because there was a time when some members of Gaudiya Math were coming onto the scene, so to speak, internationally, and preaching, um, and then there was ISKCON members and so forth, and many people many devotees were traveling and initiating people, and I didn't like the scene. It made me uncomfortable. It was competition and criticisms of one preacher of another preacher, and things like this, and then the followers would be followers of those preachers would be even more um, um, kind of sectarian and whatnot. My guru is better than your guru. I didn't like any of that. So at a certain point, I wanted to drop out and just write. At that time, I acquired the property in California, Audaria, just to write with a few devotees as a staff to help, who wanted to be with me, and I had a few disciples, but I didn't want to initiate anybody more. But then, I wrote some books and they were popular and well received, and people read the book and then they want to meet you, and so it's I I I succumbed to their sincerity and so forth. Started initiating people, and then started, well, maybe I'll open ashrams in a different way and kind of thing. But I think it would have been maybe better if I hadn't done it exactly like that. It's relative. I mean, it was all good, and good things came from it and so forth. But as I say, I mean, I did that, and I didn't. I still managed to write considerably, but I kind of like the idea of just giving the siksha. Some people will want to get initiated, but then they have to understand what to expect from me. I'm not going to manage their life, or I'm going to tell them what the teaching is. Set a good example and expect that they follow the teaching. Does that make sense? That's what I'm doing. It's good. And like I said, we have a big sangha. We don't even know some of them. I don't even know some of them, some of the members. And I think we add something to the international community. I'm quite different. I'm quite different than any other preacher that you'll find, Indian or American or Polish, European, Latin American. And there's a place for what I do. So what else?
Guru Maharaj, the state is going to want it now, pick culture. How to persuade sort of non-followers that the journey of Christian consciousness has so much beauty, not just the destination.
How do you convince people of that?
Yeah, the journey and how Krishna helps you in your everyday challenges, rather than just trying to get to Krishna as quick as possible. You know, if you're distributing books and things and just teaching people on a basic level.
Well, I think that people, need to understand that that spiritual life and its pursuit is not necessarily a pursuit that's going to make everything better. Look at the Pandavas. They were exiled for 12 years. There are so many examples. One of my disciples, Gaurangi Priya, she wanted to write a book. I don't think she's gotten to the task yet of all of the difficulties from the Bhagavatam and the lives of so many devotees. And so if you market Krishna consciousness like that to people who want a spiritual practice that's going to just make their life rosy in all respects, I don't think you're going to be marketing Gaudiya Vaishnavism to them. You should market Gaudiya Vaishnavism to them for what it is, which tells you there's a lot of problems, and you've created them, and you've sown, and you're going to reap them. But let's stop it. Let's put an end to it, and tolerate, what we're due that's coming our way, and act in such a way that the future will be bright, which is bright for the present. But it's puts it in perspective so that they don't have false expectations. Because if you market it in such a way as, this is going to really improve your everyday life and so forth, which I think it can, but it can give you the ability to deal with the problems of life that are inevitably going to be there. When I was a young boy in I think 6th grade, I don't know how old you are in 6th grade, 12, 10 or 12, something like that. I fell in love with a girl. First love. Her name was Cindy. And right. Well, it didn't work out. And I was very upset by that. And so my mother, she spoke to me about it. And when I listened to it, I realized what she's doing is giving me a bigger picture. She's giving me a bigger picture. I was focused on a very, small picture. She's giving me the bigger picture and putting it in perspective. And when you get into the bigger picture, the small problem that looked big is now seen to be as small as it is. And the ability to deal with it then is, your ability to deal with it is so much enhanced, right? So I learned this lesson very, very young, that philosophy, if you will, gives you the bigger picture. It puts things in perspective that you lose sight of, and thus the small problems become large. Like, you can just do that with regard to the world in general. We live here, you're Europeans, largely, what are your problems? There are people that don't, that go to bed hungry every night. And what are your problems? We've got first world problems. What about the third world problems? Right? They're much bigger, and we are so troubled by our first world problems because she said, I don't feel, or what, oh goodness, it's so you need so any philosophical, well, Krishna consciousness as a philosophical, as a worldview, it looks, in a very big way at the world. And the problem that the sun is burning out is part of the, is included within it and dealt with. So it has great capacity to put things in perspective for the thoughtful person. And, anybody who's going to pursue spiritual life has to be a little thoughtful. There are a lot of people that don't because they're looking for something other than what it is. They're looking for just some relief, or they're emotionally troubled in some way, and they want a Band-Aid to fix it, and so forth and so on. So I think it's it's problematic to some extent to market Gaudiya Vaishnavism, come up with some creative way to market it and say it'll do this for you, it'll do that for you. And you made people who join on that basis may be quite disappointed with it. And you can see it on the internet. I see it on the internet. Devotees complaining about Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's not progressive enough, or it's not this socially that, or it's whatever. They've got a site. It's called Progressive Vaishnavism. It's not progressive, and it's not Vaishnav, from my point of view. If you were politically progressive, it's a term now, you'd think that site was weird, and if you're a real Vaishnav, you think so also. So, they don't understand it. So it's not working for them. They have expectations of it that are unrealistic, that aren't really, part of the package. It can be sound and very beautiful, and it does. Now I can speak very poetically about the goal and so forth. But when you come to the practice, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj said, "Die to live." It was like, wow, that sounds far out, Die to live, yeah, He said, but it's a very bitter pill to swallow, to actually take it, right? Now, we say that bhakti is very user-friendly and so forth, and it is compared to yoga or gyan. What are you going to do? Get naked and go live in the Himalayas? That doesn't sound too user-friendly. That's it. Go. You heard it. You understood. Go. Stop thinking. Okay, I got it. Now what? And your first thought. Now what? So it's very friendly comparatively to other serious spiritual disciplines that they ask everything of you. In fact, the fact is, Gaudiya Vaishnava is a little bit of a sleight of hand because it asks more of you. It doesn't ask you just to stop taking from the world. It asks you to give everything to Krishna. Of course, there's the giving is the getting, so there's more to be gained. But it's a serious spiritual practice and tradition, and it doesn't require a whole bunch of people for it to happen in your life. And there's always going to be plenty of people that aren't going to take it up. The whole world is not going to take it up. You can have these, ideas about, like Bhaktivinoda, putting it on the world stage, and then, having the magistrates wearing tilak and so forth. Well, those are it's a motivational on a certain level, and it's a noble idea and so forth. But it's the material world. It's samsara. It's not easy to get out of. Someone asked asked me why the material world's so hard to get out of. I said, well, if you're going to make an illusion, Krishna is going to make the best illusion. And, very difficult. Of course, he didn't make it. It just is. It's just part of his being. There's a shadow, to the light, and that's the material world, and it has a semblance of the beauty of the spiritual world, but it's not quite there. So it is what it is. So I would shy away a little bit from trying to package it in such a way that people misunderstand what they're going to get from it. They're not going to. So that said, I think what's important in terms of explaining our tradition to other people in the world, which you may be enthusiastic to do because you feel it's very good, and is to give intellectual integrity to it. Hmm? Hmm? Bring intellectual integrity to the teaching. This will be the function of an intermediate devotee, a madhyamadikari. Hmm? The Kanishta just has some basic faith and then tries to express their faith and expects everybody should believe in it, even if it doesn't make sense to them, because it hasn't been reasoned out and it hasn't been uh, 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 put up against other arguments and other worldviews. You maybe you're a young person. You hear about Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a meta narrative. So it's a meta narrative, means it's a narrative that answers all the questions of life. Now, because you're psychologically predisposed from the previous life and Sukriti, Bhakti Sukriti, and so forth, all the answers really work for you. And you go, well, I got all the answers, But there are other meta narratives that answer all the questions. Buddhism is another meta narrative, and Christianity's one, and materialism is one, and so maybe you grow up and you realize, wow, there are other people out there that have answered all the questions within their worldview. I don't agree with those answers, but they resonate with those people. And so, now how can I present Gaudiya Vaishnavism with the kind of intellectual integrity where I recognize, I understand why all the answers are not going to work for everybody, and then think how to reframe it and so forth and give it a context. This is what I mean, like bring intellectual integrity to the teaching instead of just some dogma that you imbibed and you regurgitated and expect. So what I'm not talking about is intellectually coming up with some creative package that says hey, you like music, we like music too, let's do kirtan and bring the guitars and the horns and we'll have a concert and everybody would okay, it's not a bad thing, but kirtan is not a form of entertainment. That's not what it is. It's not like you form a kirtan group, get an album, get your picture on the front and there you go. It's a religious exercise. So rather than use your intelligence to come up with things like that make it seem like it's, hey, you like it like that. We do that too, maybe we don't, maybe that's not exactly like you're accurate. Use your intelligence to understand the arguments from scripture and what's the importance of the book, what does it mean, what is revelation, what is our capacity to know the whole, on our strength of our own acquired tools of intellect, mind, and senses, which deceive us all the time. Is there a more perfect way of knowing? We call it revelation. What is the implication behind that philosophically? And if reality, if the whole wants to show itself to the part can know, but the part can't swallow the whole, something like that. So I think that this was a good thing to do for sharing Krishna consciousness with people, to speak about it. Look at the current philosophical perspectives in the world, currents of thought, and so forth, and find in Gaudiya Vaishnavism what is essentially there, and what it's saying, and how it's universal, and reveal the universality of it, if you will. Karma, Gyan, Yoga. What does karma mean? What is karma? Karma marg, for example. It's not just something out of Hinduism. People pursue God for things. So it's relative everywhere. So it's just one example, but like that. I think that that's useful, and that will help people. And you know, that's one thing when I began to serve outside of ISKCON, I was disappointed to, you know, to realize that that if someone was to go to a gathering, let's say of, you know, friends in San Francisco, educated people, if someone said, well, where were you this weekend? He said, oh, I was at a Buddhist retreat, you know, and it would be like, oh, cool, you know, they talk about it. If he said, well, I was at the Hare Krishna temple, they go, well, see you later, you know. So I wanted to, you know, address that. That's what I think should be addressed, you know. I mean, it's just, which means that Gaudiya Vaishnavism is not well understood by many of the people who are spreading it. It's not well understood. It's so, I mean, rich. Buddhism is a rich spiritual tradition, but I mean, comparatively, I mean, Gaudiya Vaishnava is so rich, theologically nuanced, and so forth. And you can see that it gets some traction, in considerable traction in the field of Indology. From an academic point of view, it's just very interesting. Well, oh, it's very interesting. They've got spiritual bodies and this idea of Leela and so forth. And these concepts are very extraordinary. The play of the absolute and so forth. So to present them with intellectual integrity, I think is to really, you owe it to your own tradition, you know, to do that. And Prabhupada was concerned about speaking to educated people. So that so to present it in such a way, and we want to change the vocabulary a little bit, and so it gets a little static and stale, and you know, you can, with other devotees you could say it, and so on, it makes sense. But I remember when Prabhupada passed on, one of my godbrothers called the local newspaper and said, I wanted to let you know that Swami A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami has left the world. The guy said, where did he go? What are you talking about? You know, he left the world, you know, which is so, you know, you got to kind of tune into, you know, where you are, what the language is, what, you know, what, yeah. So to be represented in your own culture, you know, and so on and so forth. You know, and there are devotees who say, we want to present it in our own culture, and therefore we, you know, nobody should wear a dhoti or a sari. And then there's other people say, we want Vedic culture, and that means dhoti and a sari, you know. And I'm like, wear a dhoti or a sari or whatever you want, you know. And then, you know, people are going to do what they want. It's okay, you know. Everybody here, I didn't give a dress code to come here, you know. So, and it's not, you know, you have to be like fanatic about one or the other, you know. So these kinds of focuses, they're kind of, I think, counterproductive in terms of, again, there was a vision of Bhaktivinoda to put Gaudiya Vaishnavism on the stage of the world of religions. I think it's been done to some extent, but still, people still wondering what it is. You know, it's up there. Okay, you know, it has some interest, and there are people, a number of people joining it. And you know, I mean, the success of ISKCON in terms of membership and so forth has, since Prabhupada's departure, has largely been in India. Okay, and in Eastern Europe, which had just come out from, you know, well, underneath communism and so forth, and so like Russia, you know, like you know, so. But in the United States, where Prabhupada had success, you know, it's not very successful. No, it's not. I served every deity in North America. but it was very different in those days now. And so something, you know, I mean, the deity worship is very nice in all the temples, but the congregation is largely ethnic Hindus, which isn't a bad thing. But I mean, you know, in America, you'd think you'd have some currency to attract the educated public in the country, which is what Prabhupada wanted, you know. So, and everywhere else as well. So, those are some thoughts about that. Does that help? Yeah. Yes.
I have a following question related to the aspect of Sharanagati, which means Rakshishratiti Vishvasava, the confidence that Krishna will protect us. So the confidence can be built on experience, but we have different experience. Because devotees, they get sick, they went bankrupt, they even die prematurely sometimes. And if someone will say, okay, Krishna is protecting them spiritually, but we also see that they have a lot of spiritual problems. Sometimes they're losing guru, their faith, and then sometimes they point down. So, and second part is so how we should understand this confidence. And second part of the question is how to practice, because it seems that sometimes devotees they go to the extreme. Sometimes someone is overthinking about the protection, about health and things like that, and rely on themselves. And sometimes they just completely neglected about the future, for example. They don't care about health license and when they be old, yeah, something like that, and they have different problems. So how to properly balance way to practice this angle of Sharanagati? Więc moje pytanie dotyczy aspektu Sharanagati, który w sanskrycie nazywa się Rakshishratiti Vishvasava, czyli ufność, że Krishna będzie nas chronił w każdych warunkach. Ale ta ufność jest zbudowana na doświadczeniu. A my mamy różne doświadczenia z bratami, że bratowie chorują, bankrutują, nawet umierają przedwcześnie. No a jeśli ktoś powie, że okej, ale Krishna chroni w sposób duchowy, a też widzimy, że bratowie mają różne problemy duchowe. Tracą guru, tracą wiarę, upadają i to jest, więc jak właściwie zrozumieć to, jak się a druga część pytania dotyczyła, jak to praktykować, bo jest tendencja, żeby wchodzić w skrajności, czyli jedni nie dbają o swoją przyszłość, o emeryturę, o to, żeby być ubezpieczeni, a drudzy z kolei za bardzo jakby martwią się, w ogóle nie polegają na kluczu.
I think that the idea that Krishna is my protector is an aspect of Sharanagati, Rakshishratiti Vishvasava. You know, you have to look at that in light of the examples. Again, we mentioned it earlier, of so many devotees in the Bhagavatam, the paradigmatic figures of the Bhagavatam. Cite the Pandavas again. Certainly Krishna was their protector, but they certainly underwent great difficulty at the same time, right? So I think it's a confidence, it's a conviction, philosophical conviction. One's convinced that despite the fact that there will be many difficulties, if I rely upon Krishna, ultimately, those will be overcome. But it's you know it's kind of a long haul, and rather than looking for some immediate result. While there may be examples of that happening in somebody's life, that Krishna comes right into their life and protects them, it may not happen that way for everyone. But you know, Uddhava, he was pretty wise, and he reasoned who would take shelter of anybody else. When we see that Krishna's like this, he liberated Putana. So he thought, oh my God, why would I? This is his nature. We don't find those kind of examples in other manifestations of divinity. So given that he is like this, it makes perfect sense that I should take shelter of him and no one else. And I have confidence based on the way he has shown himself to be at times. in relation to his devotees, reliable, that I can rely upon him. I mean, not for some immediate circumstance. Or we may look, as sometimes it's reasoned that my immediate circumstance is actually been mitigated by my influence, by the influence of Krishna in terms of what it should have been karmically. I think some charge of reason like that. I would have been like this, but instead it happened like that. And it does one well to think like that, because it just fosters then dependence on Krishna and so forth. So, that's a brief answer to that. There are other aspects of Sharanagati too, like accepting what's favorable and rejecting what's unfavorable. So to the extent that we're doing that, maybe we can say we can expect Krishna's protection. So if you're expecting Krishna's protection, but you're not accepting what's favorable for bhakti and rejecting what's not favorable, then maybe he'll be a little more distant, because we have our own idea what's favorable and what's not favorable based on the reading of the world drawn from our senses, mind, and intellect. And we may be right about it sometimes, relatively speaking, or we may be wrong about it sometimes. And of course, that particular perspective is going to create the dualities in the mind of good and bad, happy and sad, and so on and so forth. What Krishna tells us in the Gita are things that we tolerate, because that's where they come from. There's a perception of good and bad, happy and sad, hot and cold. It's coming from the senses. What's hot for you may be cold for me. So, which is it? It's neither. That's the answer. So to go there, that's a whole other dimension, right? And in the meantime, some tolerance is necessary. But if we accept what's favorable for bhakti and reject what's unfavorable, if we can do that, to the extent that we can do this, so that's what we're practicing to do. This is just the beginning, baby steps of spiritual life in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Then you have a new criterion. My mind and senses may say it's unfavorable, but it may be favorable for bhakti, or maybe my mind and senses say it's favorable, but it may be unfavorable for bhakti. Now I have a new criterion of what's good and bad. If I put that in place, I rise above the dualities that have been created by my mind and senses. Now I'm in a position to do bhajan, which is actually performed on the platform of Advaita, above duality. So, you look at the whole picture of Sharanagati, it's good. But in general, I think the devotee thinks Krishna is my maintainer. That's central to Sharanagati. And there's good philosophical reason to think like that. Now, with regard to the second part of your question, you're kind of asking, I think there's something to be said for the Christian saying that God helps him who helps himself. Maybe it's a Protestant ethic. I don't know. God helps him who helps himself. Don't. We say also don't try to see God. Act in the way that God will want to see you. Something like that. So I think that you could be concerned about your everyday life and your health and so forth, and you should be concerned about it, and not expect Krishna to be concerned about it. And there's the sadhaka deha. We say you're not the body. We could say you are the body. I initiated you. Now you are the body, because now the body's not the same. Now you received the mantra. You have a sadhaka deha. You apply yourself accordingly and take care of that sadhaka's deha. Deha means body. Sadhaka's body. Take care of the body. It belongs to Krishna. Now, take care of it nicely, and it's an instrument for serving. That's why we got bodies. Why the whole world is here. Mahavishnu wanted to provide bodies for everybody in Susupti. They could come out and have a vehicle through which to pursue himself, to meet their maker. So there's a compassionate, element to the expansion of the world. So this is what the human body's for. So if you have the right consciousness, then you can take care of it in great detail, and it's not considered to be a distraction, and it won't be a problem. And the other side, of course, is a little bit artificial. You don't think about your health and all, and because you're not the body, you may not be the body, but okay, I can tell you you're not the body, but I should make a footnote, but you're in the body right now, and the body is you're not the body, but it's a vehicle by which you can realize that you're not the body. The body itself and the mind. Krishna says, what does he say in the Gita about the mind? Udarat atmanatmanam atmanam avasarayat atmaivatmano bandur atmaivipuratmanaha. Learned that when I was a young brahmachari. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul in Prabhupada's language, and the enemy as well. So you can use the mind as the friend, which is central to yoga, to control the mind, fix the mind on Krishna and spiritual practice. Or it can be just the opposite, right? Be your greatest enemy. The mind is like a thief that stole money from the bank and ran down the street saying, "Thief, thief! Somebody stole money from the bank." And then where did he go? It's over there. The problem's over there. He's over there. Might be over there. The problem is here. You thief. You thief. The mind is absorbed in thoughts of things only. All right. So problematic. All right. So, but you use this so that the body should be used, the mind should be used. That's the proper use of the human life, and so there's every reason to keep it healthy and to create a favorable environment. And everybody's different. What would be a favorable environment for one might be, I need a partner. Get that solved. Someone else may not need that. That might be more uncomfortable, less favorable. Those are, in a minority, but the power of bhakti is that it, it can be applied in any number of environments. So there's some, we're told we should tolerate, and I always say, yeah, you should tolerate, but you should also told you have to create a favorable environment. So create a favorable environment and then tolerate what's going to come within that. Don't stay in an environment that's intolerable when you can change it. Get up and do something about it, change it. Be a little proactive. Take care of your health, take care of your psychology and so forth, but they're not an end unto themselves. So, you have to see that also, right? Balanced. Yes.
Generalnie wszystkim nam się wydaje, że rozumiemy, że nie mamy rozwiązać. Robimy zrozumienie. Oceniamy, myślimy, wydaje nam się, że widzimy właściwie.
Generally, we can say that the way we perceive things, we are convinced that we see them correctly as they are.
W swoim życiu widzę, że z roku na rok wydawało mi się, że coś rozumiem, a po roku nie, to nie było to. Tak wiele lat mi się coś tam zmieniało w głowie.
At some point, I thought that I understand certain situation, but after some time, I realized that I actually don't understand.
Pytanie, jaką mogę mieć pewność, kiedy mogę mieć pewność, że właściwie moja ocena, moja wizja, czy to zmieniam coś, kombinuję, planuję, czy to jest właściwe, to tylko mi się wydaje, bo generalnie to nie patrzę na relacje, nie jesteśmy w stanie widzieć właściwie.
How or when can I be certain that the way I see the world is the correct way as it is?
z drugiej strony często właśnie wchodzimy w tematy takie wysokie, zaawansowane, duchowość, praca.
So many times we talk about very high topics like Raja, Prema.
Ale nie wiem jak inni, ale ja tego raczej w tym ani w tym wszystkim nie zrealizuję.
I think that I will not realize these things in this life nor the next one.
Więc w pewnym sensie nie wpływa to na moje życie tu i teraz. Od razu.
So in a way,
Widzę cel, ale tu i teraz tak niekoniecznie nie.
so in a way, it seems not that significant right now for me because I'm just focusing on the goal, but I not necessarily understand all these fine things.
Czasami mi się wydaje, że właśnie to analizowanie, co się dzieje wokół mnie, jest czasami ważniejsze niż właśnie krytyczna. Bo to mnie wiąże, a ja tego nie rozumiem. Wydaje mi się, że się tego operowaniu, ale nie jadą 2-5, nie ma efektu. Więc czasami wydaje mi się, że takie analizowanie rzeczy, które nas otaczają, jest dla mnie ważniejsze tu i teraz, ponieważ one mnie wiążą.
So sometimes it seems to me that all this analyzing of the world or the things is more important to me right now because I don't understand, for example, Krishna that well.
Więc taką mieć pewność, czy właściwie rozumiem.
But you're having a problem. You said you're having a problem analyzing the world. That's how you began. You began by saying you're having a problem analyzing the world. You thought you analyzed it, and then you realized you analyzed it wrong. So if you want to focus on analyzing the world, you're already saying that you're making mistakes doing that. So that's not working for you. You want to focus on what the world is like. Well, in our books, we give a version of what the world is like. It's not a very pretty picture. You know, it's realistic. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. You know, it's not a bowl of cherries, it's the pits. So happiness leads to distress because the happiness it's derived from attachments, and the attachments are to temporal things. We can't keep them. So the more you like them, the more of a recipe for a problem that is. These are very basic philosophical truths. You can find it in Buddhism. You can, you know, Jesus Christ say the same thing. And we're saying it also. So these are very strong, you know, you look at the great spiritual traditions that have produced mystics and sadhus, they're all agreeing on this base perspective on what the world is like. And they're all agreeing that reality transcends this problem. And then they differ as to what the prospects in that ultimate reality are. Those are beautiful differences, you know, you can discuss. There's different, you know, all roads, they say, in Italy lead to Rome. Okay, well, Ramakrishna said it like this, Yatamat Patpat, but all paths lead to the same place. Prabhupada didn't like that. But there's some truth about it. But there's something untrue about it too. Or in other words, take my example. All roads lead to Rome in Italy. I guess they do, you know, okay, whatever, that was the capital or still is. All roads lead to Rome. So all these paths that have actually produced mystics, we can think, well, that one works. There's an example. There's an example. There aren't many of them. Well, you don't expect them to be many. Manushanam sahasreshu kaschidhyatati siddhe. Yatatama bisiddhanam kaschin mam viti tatvata. You have to swallow that. You will be that 1 out of 1,000. You're already that 1 out of 1,000,000 that's interested. And now you're going to be the 1 out of 1,000,000 that's interested and become successful. That takes time. Stay in the, you know, stay the course. That's a given. The ideal is very, very high. Yes, you won't attain it tomorrow. But what's keeping you on the path is that such an ideal exists and it's attainable. and the knowledge that to get there, certain preliminary things have to be done. So back to my analogy, all roads lead to Rome. All these paths say that attachment is the womb from which suffering comes, to put it in Krishna's arises. And I'll put it the opposite way. Love is born out of sacrifice. Misery comes from attachment. Sacrifice means giving up attachment. And love is born out of sacrifice. Now you're going to find this is a theme. Nobody's going to disagree with me. Amongst the great mystics, they all say that. All roads lead to Rome. But there are many different addresses in Rome. Just because you got to Rome, well, there's many, many different houses, right? So they all lead basically, those that have results to let's say, to transcendence, but then they differ about details. Within Vaishnavism, there are differences about the nature of the Paravyam. Is it majestic, Vaikuntha? Is it Goloka? Is it merging with the Paramatma, merging with Brahman? God has, according to the Bhagavatam, innumerable faces. They have a no-face face. I don't know, some people think God has no face. So that's just a way of saying it's not material, right? God has no form. I think that's just a way of saying whether they realize it or not. It's not a form like, we have a limited form here. It's not like that. It's not like that. Anyway, there are different opinions about transcendence. And with regard to that, Gaudiya Vaishnavism has a very detailed opinion about the nature of transcendence and its prospect. It's very, very detailed. And if you look carefully at that, you'll come to the conclusion that, this is being said on the basis of experience. They didn't just make it up. Goloka Vrindavan, it's just not something that somebody made up. Any more than chakras are something that somebody made up. You think somebody just sat down and imagined that there were chakras? We're talking about the subtle body. No, some yogi experienced the subtle body, and then they, writing the sutras about it, and this one an aspect of it, and so forth. These things are just made up. It'd be insane, right? And then there are living examples of yogis and sitting deep in trance and so forth, and great devotees who chant Hare Krishna and weep and so on and so forth. Look at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is experience of transcendence, and the different traditions are affording their constituents some insight and information about what they found to be the goal, which is beyond samsara, which we say is a variegated realm. There are different possibilities there. So, okay, we're on the same page. So if you want to know, if you find it hard to relate to Krishna Lila entirely, you think it's too high and so forth, and you'd rather focus on down-to-earth things, then focus on these down-to-earth basic things. And we emphasize that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in 8 verses takes us from the beginning to the end, from cleansing the chitta, the heart, to praying in union and separation in 8 verses. So yes, you won't get there tomorrow, but the wonderful thing about Krishna consciousness, of course, is that if you hear about Krishna, you hear about Krishna Lila from sadhus and so forth, you participate in Krishna Katha. You take a book like Circle of Friends. It's a book about Lila, but it's also the whole. We read a description of the Leela. It may be a little charming. You think, sounds charming, but I don't know. It's like beyond me. Well, it also has a wealth of philosophy and theology in it, underlying it to help us ground those high ideals in a philosophical perspective and a worldview. And so, there's another thing to be said about this. Bhaktivedanta Reinmarsh used to give this example. I like that if a person has dysentery, they can't digest anything. If you go to an Ayurvedic doctor and you have dysentery, the doctor will tell you, okay, take a spoonful of ghee. And you'll say, ghee? I mean, I'm going to throw that up right away. That's so rich. How can you tell me to eat ghee? I can't even keep water down. He says, well, because yes, you will vomit it up, but some part of it will stick. And because it's such a condensed form of food, that just a little bit of that will give you nourishment. You'll be nourished. So when you hear high topics about bhakti rasa and so forth, it's like getting a spoonful of ghee. And you go, I don't know, you might, but something will stick, it creates impressions, bhakti samskar in you. And over time, you'll reap the results of that because it'll be easy to chant Hare Krishna, you'll like Krishna and so forth. One of the things that we're doing when we speak about Leela is we're hearing about what Krishna is actually like. You have to think, I'm hearing about a real person that actually exists. What's so hard about that? And this is what he's like. He can speak the language of all we heard this morning, all the animals and the birds. Now it sounds like, well, come on. Well, we're not making this up. There's a wealth of philosophy underlying this that that speaks about why there's a person that's a super person, that's a transpersonal person. There's a wealth of philosophy that there is such a person as God, and he is has such capacities. Now you're hearing about him in Gaudiya Vaishnavism in a very human-like way, and all these qualities are mentioned. You read the quality, you see the example from the scripture and so forth. And if you're not too complicated, you think, well, that's who I want to meet. I mean, young people are doing it all the time. They're hearing about somebody, some sports person or somebody in a music world, entertainment, and they get a picture of them, they keep in their room, then become fans. What do they call them? Groupies, It's Swifties, I think it's a popular one, and so we're just, putting Krishna on the stage there, and this is what he's like, and that's what these books are describing. And you think there's actually a person like this, and I can meet him, and this is the way. This is how you do it. It's how to become a groupie for Krishna, and so you're happy with that. I'm on the course. I'm going to meet him, and even he sent, one of his closer associates to tell me more about him, how fortunate I am. And he's also telling me, he is Krishna is here and you are here. And to get from here to there, you have to focus here. And where should you focus? Well, you should focus what the world is like, which is what you're trying to do, but you're not having a good job of it. You're doing a good job of it. As you said, you thought it was like this, but you found it was not, was different. Well, the worldview of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, like any spiritual tradition worth its salt, if you will, worth its weight, is telling you the same thing about what the world is like. They're all saying the same thing. And so instead of trying to figure it out on your own, one rely on someone who's transcended the world, because if you transcend the world, you understand the world. That doesn't mean you understand every detail of how bees mate, and so forth, and what cockroaches eat. I mean, I couldn't, give you their menu offhand, but understood the world means that you transcended it. It's a trap. It's illusory. It's not what it appears to be, and so forth and so on. When you think you've gotten, you've actually lost. That's karma. You've gotten something, now you owe. The fact that you owe is obscured by your infatuation with what you've gained, that as soon as you've gained it, it's started to disappear. Now, I mean, this isn't the real, pretty picture of the world, and, maybe you can't hear it all the time, but it's good to hear it every now and then. more often than not, probably it's best because it provides negative impetus for pursuing the path in a pragmatic way. So yes, Krishna's up here and he's like that, and I'm probably not going to get there too soon, perhaps, but that's where I want to go. I want to be convinced about that. That's and why. Well, there's good philosophical reasons. Now, how? And the how is exactly what you're talking about. What the world's like. That's the you have to. That has to be a huge part of the picture. Because if you don't understand what the material world's like, in a sense in which it's spoken about in the great spiritual traditions, then you're not in a position to make any spiritual progress, right? So first, cleanse the heart. Yeah. That's and another thing is that you're going to also think you understand Krishna consciousness, and then 10 years later you're going to realize, oh, it was different than I thought. And that's going to go on forever. So you got to get used to that too. So I can't see you that well, but I don't know how well that's resonating with you, but you got the sun in the behind you, so
To ma charakter, że źle ocenił swoich uczniów, że ma charakter, że źle ocenił możliwości swoich uczniów.
Then let's say to ask the question in the context, of you saying that you,
Źle ocenił możliwości swoich uczniów.
that you, didn't correctly judge the abilities of your disciples,
don't what?
didn't correctly judge the abilities of your disciples.
Właśnie to mi chodziło, czy ja oceniam możliwości świetły ciała, mowy, inteligencji, czy właściwie, czy nie. Kiedy mogę mieć pewność, nie ulega wątpliwości, że ktoś na tam jest najważniejszy. Ale czy dobrze się oceniam, czy nie roki nagle te materialne rzeczy gdzieś tam nie ściągną i start jakby możliwość kontynuowania, bo one będą przytłoczą mnie po prostu.
So the Krishna Gata is the most important thing for me, but I'm concerned about the way I understand myself, because maybe in the next 2 years, some materials that
Dużo przyjaciół, właśnie moich znajomych bardzo podeszło, nie dlatego, że stracili wiarę, nie?
so maybe in the future the attachment effect can drag me down, and maybe I can lose my faith. I have many friends that they
Keep good association. Keep good association. That won't happen. It happened to your friends because they don't have good association. That's why it happened. If you have good association, that won't happen. And as far as the adhikar of my students go, they all seem to like the books that I write. They're all here, but that you have appetite for that. That's good, right? You too. You like Krishna Katha. Don't worry that in the future, maybe I won't. You're wasting your time with that kind of worry. There's a reason some of the people, friends, have, left the path or so forth. And the main reason is that they don't have good association. You came and listened to me years and years ago, and you didn't know what you would hear, and you didn't expect to hear what you heard. Well, when you heard it, you were like very happy about that. So you keep coming back. So you're doing good. Your friends should look at your example rather than you looking at their example. Your example is a success. You come to these gatherings and so forth. So, and we appreciate it very much. Okay, Dobja.
I was quite anxious to ask a question about yesterday's class. I don't know if you'd like to take on that.
That's going to be maybe for tomorrow's class or something. Yeah. But we sat here for a long time, answered some kind of broad and general questions. So we'll meet again tonight and have a lecture. Okay. Well, Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Fine.